Hi, everybody, and welcome. I am here today with Lisa Bildy. She graduated from Western Law School and practiced as a trial lawyer before an unexpected hiatus to raise and homeschool her sons. Upon her return to the professional workforce, Lisa led a successful campaign to stop new DEI requirements for lawyers in Ontario. She then worked at the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms as a staff lawyer before striking out on her own in 2021 to further the cause of defending civil liberties and individual freedoms. Lisa is an elected bencher governor of the Law Society of Ontario and sits on the advisory board for the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism, otherwise known as FAIR, and has most recently founded the New Free Speech Union of Canada. Thank you so much for joining us today, Lisa.
My pleasure.
Yay. So I would love to get us started a little bit with talking about your leap back into law in 2017, I believe. What is it that lit, or what was it that lit the fire for you to take such a public stand in advocating for the Stop SOP campaign?
Hmm. I guess because I had been sort of off the hamster wheel professionally and sort of, a little outside the box with homeschooling my kids, which I had not planned to do. It was something that kind of, took on a life of its own and happened because of the nature of my own kids. But during their later years, I was freed up to spend a bit more time kind of monitoring social trends, and I was aware of some of the things that I saw evolving in terms of what DEI meant and how authoritarian some of the proponents of it were. And when I saw it being rolled out in my law society, as I started paying attention to that again, and a requirement that not only did they support DEI principles, EDI as they called them, but they wanted all lawyers, as a condition of practicing law, to agree to promote them. And so, although they sound like very nice words, I felt that they were not really what they were purporting to be. That there were a lot of problems with the idea of it, and it was a very political doctrine that we were being asked to espouse, which violates our freedom as lawyers to be, well, to essentially be an independent bar. I mean, that's really important that we be able to defend anybody, regardless of their views, that we be allowed to advocate stringently and vigorously on behalf of people. And it seemed like it was going to cause a lot of problems for us in the profession. And it was a very existential issue for a lot of lawyers who don't share those views. And they felt that they couldn't practice in that environment. So I spoke up. Others did in other contexts. I ended up kind of pulling a bunch of people together, and we started this pushback effort, which we called Stop SOP, the Statement of Principles. And ultimately, we ended up running an election to elect different people to govern our law society. And we ended up in that year, in 2019, taking 22 seats, which was enough to, I guess, stir things up. And ultimately, we got rid of that statement of principles requirement.
Wow, that is incredible. So, how did seeing so many lawyers rally behind this Stop SOP movement shape your view on advocacy and community?
Well, it shaped it very importantly because I recognized that a lot of people really felt like they were alone, that they thought, certainly in those days, I mean, this was early days where cancel culture was really coming into stride. People didn't know that what other people's views were, and they were afraid to express them in order, out of worry that they might be taken down next. I think that may be lessening a little bit now, but at that time it was quite scary to say that you had concerns about equity. Equity being a principle that really is completely inimical to equality, which is the value that undergirds Western civilization, that every person, regardless of their color and gender and what have you, is equal under and before the law. Equity doesn't allow that. Equity pits group against group, and some groups are oppressors and some are oppressed, and we have to adjust shares, social shares, and it's a very different concept. But we couldn't talk about that in those days. So once somebody sort of raised their head above the parapet, others really kind of felt like they could come out and support as well. But perhaps we ought not to be too, I don't know, sort of enthusiastic about the legal response, because that we put up a website and asked people to sign. Probably half of the only 300 or 400 lawyers who signed it did so with their actual names. Most wanted to be anonymous. And we won those elections, the elections with probably a couple thousand votes each. Now, you have to know that there are 55 at the time. There were 55,000 lawyers in the province of Ontario. So That was only a couple thousand who paid attention enough to make that happen. And apparently, in that very first year that the statement of principles was rolled out, even though it wasn't yet going to be generating consequences if you didn't comply, almost 98% of lawyers went ahead and checked the box to say that they did comply. So um, it is important to rally people together. It's going to be a very big battle to try and help shift the culture back towards one that respects freedom a bit more. But I think working in the community and helping others to find their voice and their courage is an essential part of any pushback effort.
Absolutely. And you've been pretty outspoken about defense of freedom when it comes to choice in what happened with the COVID lockdowns. Were there any specific instances or examples that kind of sparked your realization that, oh, this is a really big problem that goes beyond just protecting the public?
Well, yes. I mean, I actually tweeted about it on March the 13th of 2020. I remember because we hadn't actually brought lockdowns in. It struck me as an extreme reaction to something that we already knew was primarily limited to a particular demographic in terms of severe harm. So there would have been a much less restrictive and onerous approach that could be taken. I could see that, and others saw it, but not many people commented on it at the time. But that this was going to be very draconian and also very damaging because we are such such an integrated, highly tuned, intricate society now. We're complex. We've built this up over many, many decades, centuries, to the point of extreme complexity that you can't just sort of flick a switch and expect everything to just shut down nicely and then boot back up nicely. There's going to be harms, and that was, I think, obvious, but apparently not to too many. But what happened is a cultural stranglehold over the narrative took over, and people were afraid because they were being told that they had to be afraid. There was, the news media was all over it with a running tally of everybody who died with COVID, by the way, not of COVID. And so there was some manipulation in the data that was designed to elicit more fear, and that fear fed into the politicians' reactions because they couldn't do anything that might be perceived to be causing people harm. But the lockdown harms were real too, and they were just a little less obvious at the time, I think.
That makes sense. And so now that you have kind of helped build this, free speech union, what is part of the mission that you are most excited about now moving forward? We're 5 years out from COVID. Do you feel that you're gaining good traction, or is it still kind of an uphill climb at this point?
Well, we're very new on the scene. In the United Kingdom, where the Free Speech Union started 5 years ago, they have really gone like gangbusters. I mean, they had a slow start as they kind of developed their reputation and built out the infrastructure necessary to do the work they do. But because free speech has been under such enormous threat there, they just keep growing and growing. There's so many people who are their members now, lots of donors. So it's become a very successful organization. I guess I'm of two minds. If we're going to be very successful, which I, on one hand, hope we are, so that we can do good work, that means that we have a free speech problem in this country. If everything starts to go wonderfully and everybody, snaps out of it and starts respecting those fundamental values again, then I wouldn't have any work to do. But that would be a good thing for the country. So, as I say, I'm of two minds. I wish it wasn't necessary, but I feel like it is, and I feel like it's going to get worse. I think we're a little bit behind the United Kingdom, but I see us on that trajectory.
That's a frightening possibility, and important to have people like you kind of on the front lines advocating for that. For any of our listeners who may, be unsure on how to start pushing back on speech restrictions and how to kind of fight to preserve free speech, what is one resource or word of encouragement that you might give to them?
Well, I mean, I think you shouldn't be hiding your light under a bushel. Don't be afraid to speak up and share your views. You'll find that a lot of people actually also share them. Now, yes, you might find that you get in the crosshairs somewhere, but that's why we're here. Here to help encourage people to speak up. And I'm not saying to go out and necessarily, say the most offensive possible thing you can. That's not really what we're talking about. Although we have to defend offensive speech too, because every kind of speech is probably going to offend somebody. And there's a lot of speech that I would personally find very odious. I don't agree with it at all. But but the principle has to be applied across the board, because once you start adding in the subjective element of, well, I don't like it, so therefore it must be, we shouldn't be allowed to say it. Well, then you're not going to have anything said. And that's where we're kind of at right now. It's so subjective, this idea that speech should be curtailed because of alleged harm, and harm being defined as it hurt my feelings. Well, my goodness, I mean, if that isn't a weapon to wield whenever you don't want to have someone else's opinion get out there and you want yours to dominate, right? So, so I do encourage people just just to test those muscles. If we don't exercise our freedom muscles, they're going to atrophy. So, and then do it prudently. Obviously, I'm not telling people to go out and lose their jobs, but and employment situations are a little more difficult because employers do have some restrictions reasonably over, what their employees say out there when they're representing them. But yeah, that's we can't just let ourselves cower and let it steamroll over us. We do need to fight back. And when there are cancellation efforts, it is important to try to mount a defense, and like Amy Ham did in the case that I'm counsel for, that we've seen in the papers recently. She stood up and fought. And it's a hard thing to do sometimes. But if you don't, again, it'll just steamroll over us, and then we won't have any rights. So
Mhm.
I'd rather be
Absolutely.
sanded, put some sand in the gears of the authoritarians as much as possible.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. So, what are some valuable lessons that you have learned when it comes to communicating with people who might have different core beliefs or political ideas than you? How have you navigated those conversations? Because it's my understanding that a lot of people find it difficult to have a conversation with somebody who is maybe on the other side of the spectrum. So, what is some advice that you could offer on how to approach those topics?
Well, it is hard these days. It didn't used to be. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when we could have conversations with people who didn't agree with us, and we sort of just agreed to disagree, and we didn't hate one another. You could go to a service club or your workplace, and you could be next to somebody who was from voted for a different party, had a different view, and you could still be friends. Somehow, in the last several decades, we've developed this notion that the political is personal. And so when someone's politics are different, we take it very, very personally, and we can be quite aggressive in defending our views and protecting our own views, which from challenge, by not allowing anybody in who might undercut them with argument. So the principle should be attack the idea, not the person. People need to learn how to have civilized conversations again. With social media, it's become very, very difficult because it's easy to hide behind an anonymous pen name and just say whatever insults you want and attack people and try and take them down. But remember, there's another person on the other side. Try to have in-person discussions as much as possible. It's a lot harder to hate people when you look at them in the eye. So, we do need to kind of, and COVID has been a big problem for this, but we do need to get out there and talk to other human beings and realize that somebody can have a different perspective on something. Maybe they're open to being convinced if you talk to them and share your views. Maybe they won't, but that doesn't mean that you have to hate them or try to get their job taken away from them or something.
Yes, and on the topic of in-person conversations and the importance of that, I feel that's a good segue into the Reclaiming Conference this year, because that ultimately is kind of what we're trying to foster, right? An opportunity for in-person conversation. And so I would love to hear a little bit about what sparked your interest in becoming involved and why you're excited to be one of our speakers this year.
Well, I'm always happy to get together with other people who want to share ideas. I love ideas. I love being in that space where I can hear what other people think about things. I mean, I spent probably most of my life what I think is sort of like sitting on the fence, because I could always understand both sides of an argument, or see validity in both sides of most arguments anyway. And but I really wanted to canvas what everybody thought about things so that I could shape my own views on things. I came up with my own unique views, but it helped to be informed by hearing from all sides. So I do find that very valuable. And it sounds like this conference is one that is trying to bridge divides and keep people talking. And so when I was invited to come and speak, I thought, well, this is a good chance for that. And I hope it is that kind of an opportunity that people, regardless of political persuasion, will recognize that it's time to start coming together again as a country and have conversations and find respect for one another and um, you know reclaim a civil society.
Absolutely. Well, we are very excited to have you join us this year and to learn more from you. To our listeners, if you all liked what you heard and you are interested in hearing more from Lisa, I highly encourage you to check out our website, weunify.ca, where you can get all the details for our conference taking place in Calgary, Alberta, this upcoming September 19th through 21st. Be sure to grab those tickets. It's going to be a wonderful conversation. You do not want to miss out. Thank you so much for your time today, Lisa, and we look forward to seeing you in person here in just a few more weeks.
Sounds good. Thank you.